Of all the red-faced rants you've ever heard from Uncle Chael, and you'll hear him about the PR department, you'll hear about the marketing department, I love to play producer, don't I? You never heard me say it about matchmaking. Not ever anywhere. Have I got red in the face and veins come on my neck? You don't know the business. How could you be in it this long? Not towards matchmaking. I must tell you, I have a pretty level confidence that that is not my strength. I love the matches. I'm a fan, but that's where loving the matches and being a fan overrides my ability to strategically make some of those matches. So I will often sit back with, what are you going to do? Now, there was a time everybody took their cues, and everybody has taken their cues from the WWE. But everybody will tell you that they took their cues from boxing. Now, I gotta tell you, it's annoying for me. I remember being a sport that was up and coming, MMA. We were the baddest dudes around, man. The whole point of it was that. The whole point in 1993 is to see which art was the best art. It had never been tested. So, once mixed martial art, its own entity, is the one that stepped forward and won the day, it was annoying for me to steal that, to watch MMA steal vernacular from one of the sports that they toppled, which was boxing. But training camp, we didn't say that, and we didn't do them, by the way. That was not true. But we started saying camp, and we started saying training camp purely because boxing had done that. Wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guys, go through the list. Taekwondo, ground, any way you want to do it. We don't jump rope. Jump rope is for a PE class when the teacher has some paperwork to go jump the rope. But that's not true for boxing. But it's actually a big component of boxing. They jump a lot of rope. Now you will not have an MMA guy that doesn't jump rope. My point here is not to take on boxing within the rope and the camps. Camp's probably helpful, and rope is most certainly a good workout. Part of my daily routine. Just sharing for you that we took it because we got it from them is what we like to tell people. Now, it was Lorenzo Fertitta himself that came out and said, we studied every business model, including that of the New York Yankees, and we went with the WWEs. Anything that you want to know in UFC, now this is up to this point, right? Vince is now out. It might not be the same. I should throw that as a disclaimer, but if you ever want to know where we're headed, just go study what they did. It was perfectly in line. And when Lorenzo handed that answer, see, this was the thing about Lorenzo. He didn't do a lot of interviews. He did not enjoy that part of the process. But if he committed and told you he would do one, he would answer whatever question he was asked. I mean, one thing about leadership is it's very difficult to get information. They know people are watching, they know people are listening, and they put out misinformation. Lorenzo just had a different code. Which is, I don't want to do interviews. I don't want to be scheduled for... But if I tell you I'll do one, I'm going to answer what you asked me. And he did. It was a big deal. It's a big deal that you listened to that. And I tell that to you because when I grew up watching Saturday morning wrestling, it was on at 11 in the morning, and it was nothing but squash matches. Now, what a squash match is, that term is where you bring out a guy that's a star or that you want to be a star. And what that truly means is just that the guy has a gimmick. Everybody that came in with a gimmick, they wanted to be a star. Then you give an opportunity, see what can happen. The cream rises to the top. Off you go. There's your business. But on Saturday morning wrestling, and you don't get that on Raw anymore. You don't get that on SmackDown anymore. On Saturday morning wrestling, you would have this guy that you're trying to push, that you're trying to elevate, that you believe has something, which means you gave him a gimmick. And he would take on what's called a jobber by slang vernacular. Now, the same guy doing the same thing, nice vernacular, as you would call him, enhancement talent. But for sure, the guy is going to lose. Oh, and by the way, it's not going to be close. He's going to get squashed. He will have one hope spot during the match. And the hope spot is where the enhancement talent, the guy that's about to get pinned 1, 2, 3, has some kind of a spot, some kind of a moment that looks like he's going to gain momentum. That's called a hope spot. And the reason you do that isn't because that's the deal you had with the jobber to do the job, because that helps the enhancement talent even more when he overcomes it. You get pinned 1, 2, 3. Then they would do something on a rare occurrence. And there was no way to get this information back then because there was no internet, there was no social media, there was no .coms. But if you were one of the fortunate households that was blessed with something known as a TV guide, then you would know, but the rest of us would not. We'd have to find out the day of. Saturday Night Live was not going to be on. Saturday night's main event was going to take its place, and it was the greatest night of wrestling. Oh, I can't even begin to explain to you how wonderful it was. And the only thing the Saturday night's main event did is it would take those same guys that you got on Saturday morning, but instead of bringing in a jobber and enhancement talent who you've never seen of with no gimmick that they're not trying to build, you don't even see his walkout. He doesn't have music. He has nothing. They put the guy used to doing the squashing with another guy used to doing the squashing. Saturday morning wrestling, you saw a guy that you knew versus a guy you didn't know. All 5 matches every week. On Saturday night's main event, it was a guy you knew versus a guy you knew, and it was just the greatest thing ever. Now that is all that wrestling is now, but make no mistake, the UFC came through that. That's what the tournaments were. And then you have these real special ones where it's a guy that won the tournament versus a guy that won the tournament, or a guy that won the tournament versus the guy that was just in a tournament and did well, but you knew who he was. That was even called a super fight back in the day. They'd put up a belt, they'd put up an award, they'd make that the feature match. They'd advertise it to the people as these great skills versus these great skills. But what it was, what the fan actually liked, just didn't know that he liked, is that he knew who this guy was and he knew who this guy was. And trying to build this business when the fans don't know either guy, think of how hard that would be. Think of how hard that must have been. So, when we end up in these spots of trying to matchmake, are we going to do squash matches? The Bo Nickel route is a very rare route. It is extremely rare at this level that can get TV time. Where you'll have it that is, he's gonna squash and he's brought in to squash. And all the media will go to him. You'll see this guy at the last possible moment when the guy in the shark suit turns to him just before they get out and lock the door. And the people that have to get out so they can lock the door don't even take their seats in Bo Nickel matches because they know they're going to be going right back through the door. I know the word build is one that a promoter loves to use because if the promoter can use the word build, he can go home and feel as though he created a star. His strategy created a star. I would love for you to give me an example of a guy who was built. And for every example, and I'll play this game with you. This isn't a joke. I'll play it literal with you. But for every guy that you give me that was built, I will give you 5 in return who they tried to build and either ruined or lost track of how many fights he still had left under contract. And by the time you built him, he was a free agent and he went somewhere else and you never got to use it anyway. I am a firm believer that you make the matches you can make when you can make them. And whatever your problem is, get the fight to the ring. Whatever your discrepancy, whatever is going on, get the fight to the ring. And we worry about everything else, go and coming out of it, get the fight in the ring. Okay, great. Jackman Atlanta calls out RockManov. Now, Jackman Atlanta versus RockManov is awesome, and I would predict it's going to happen. I would predict that just because nobody else wants to fight RockManov. And RockManov is going to have to do something, it would appear, before he can go in against Leon. Now, that's not an absolute because we're told through the rumor mill that he was actually already been offered Leon for $300. But my point remains the same. They're probably going to find each other just because no one else will. I mean, some of the great opportunities in life come along because you're willing to do a job that nobody else will. And I'd like to see that match. But I'd also ask you, what are we going to do with MVP? Because there's one match I'd like to see for MVP. And MVP's fun, and he's fine. I think he'll keep his placement on the card. There's great stuff with MVP. But there's one match that I'd really like to see, which is Ian Garry. You have 2 guys, though, with a lot of momentum there will be a belief that we should keep them away from each other. Well, one's 26 and one's 36. I don't really get it. You brought him over for something. I don't know that I understand it. Or, yeah, well, the 36-year-old matches up pretty well. He can knock off my 26-year-old. Then he knocks off your 26-year-old and he's got to rebuild. But get the matches you can get when you can get them and get the fight in the ring. We'll discuss or everything else that we're going back and forth and weighing in on. We can talk about it during the walkout and after the walkout. Get them in the ring. And I just don't know what you're going to do in that situation, right? Like Kevin Holland versus Gilbert Burns. That seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, to some degree, like just get these matches going. We don't have anything yet for Leon, but we're told a few things, and it's very obvious that he's got to fight Muhammad. Jack, 3-name Jack, stopped Gilbert Burns over the weekend. The current #1 contender that doesn't have a bout agreement, Belal Muhammad, who did a number of wonderful things, but the final thing he did is he beat Gilbert Burns. So now we're just both going back to Gilbert Burns. Okay, great. One guy stopped him and one guy beat him. Now, Belal's our guy. Please don't misunderstand me. What I'm sharing is that's how far along this journey Jack is. That's my one and only point. You could come out right now and put Jack in that spot. Hey, we call Blahal, he's hurt. Boom, we're going to make, he was going to be back up anyway, and now he's going for a title shot. Nobody complains. It's probably not what you'd predict, but nobody would complain. Okay, that's a good spot for Jack. We couldn't say that a year ago. We couldn't even say that a week ago, that he was in a conversation to go in for a world title. Very interesting positioning. And when Jack called out RockManov, it wasn't just a good call out. It wasn't just to show bravery. It was also a fight that he thought that he could get, knowing that it's because nobody else wants it, not because anybody thinks he's going to win it. But he did these things. You want to know what else Jack did? 3-Name Jack called out RockManov as a way of showing respect to Blahal. The boys in the back never agree. It's not their job to. They should be cutting each other's heads off for every opportunity. They happen to agree it's Blahal's turn. RockManov's not trying to take the spot, even though we've been told he's offered it. He said no. Jack isn't trying to take the spot. Didn't even call for it. Call for RockManov. I mean, I'm just telling you, this is the respect that Blahal's being given. And I also want you people to know why Jack did it. 3-Name Jack showed respect, like everybody else is. I think it's important that at times as an industry, we do come together, because sometimes there is the right thing to do. It's not the one that we want to do most times, and it's not the one we choose most times, but sometimes it is very clear. Belal Muhammad should be next for Leon Edwards.